I think so much of it is the more you know yourself and how you operate under stress or the most perfect day. I think it tells a lot about how you're going to react or interact with not just a crisis at hand, but kind of the world as it is.
And again, the work at iBridge is really about helping reveal and uncover those traits for people. Some people are very self-aware. I'm just going to give this to you from, sort of like all the real world experience. Some people are very self-aware and others are completely not. These assessments sort of level that playing field on teams. It's like, oh, we all kind of now know each other. As a result of that, we all kind of know each other's um, strengths, natural strengths, but I have to know first that I have to be the one to make that shift.
Join me, Jeremy Swick, on Into the Unknown, a podcast that delves into the personal journeys, stories, and experiences of individuals across diverse professions. As a historian by trade, I firmly believe that our personal histories shape our present and offer valuable insights into our paths ahead. With that being said, let's get into it. On this episode of Into the Unknown, I am joined by Jeff Harnois. How are you doing today, Jeff?
I'm doing fantastic, Jeremy. Thanks so much for having me here.
Jeff, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. I really do appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here and honored to be here. Thank you.
One of the ways I like to kick off the show is just talk about the importance of networking. And our mutual connection, Olivia, just does an amazing job of connecting not just random people, but people who have a story to share.
Hmm.
The other part of the, kicking off the show I like to do is really get to know you. I want to know that origin story. Comic book issue number one. Who are you?
Hmm. It's such a fun question, and I sometimes even struggle with the answer. And the struggle is really how far back do I go, and what do I really want to focus on, and that sort of thing. I think what I'll do is I'll start sort of early career, because obviously there was a lot of defining moments and events that have ultimately led to who I am today. I started my professional career at Apple, gosh, way back in the 80s. I was there just a few years after Apple went public. And part of my experience at Apple, we had taken a personality assessment, a psychometric test called Myers-Briggs. And in doing that assessment, I learned so much about who I am as an individual, why I am the way that I am, how, what informs the way that I think and the way that I speak and the way that I make decisions. And it was a really profound moment for me because it was insight that I had just never gotten anywhere else. In some ways, it answered a bunch of questions that I had about myself, and in other ways, it created even more questions, which has been sort of a really fun, journey of getting answers to those questions. But ultimately, it gave me a really good sense of, again, how I think and why I make decisions the way that I do and why I process information the way that I do. And ultimately, that insight allowed me to connect with others, collaborate with others in ways that I think previously were just not available to me because it was unknown to me. From Apple, I left and went to another Fortune 50 company and took on a sales role, the VP of sales for the technology division. And without any real sales training, without any formal sales background, I took this role on. And in the 18 months that I was there, I closed $100 million deal with AT&T Wireless. That's significant because it wasn't, well, you can see me. My mother always said I had a great face for radio. Um, I'm not particularly smart or intelligent. So what was it? I didn't have training in sales. So what was it? And it turns out that the exposure that I had received to Myers-Briggs in those early days helped me not only understand myself, but this is the beauty of it. It also helped me understand others. And because of that, when you go into a sales role where you're selling to, very large enterprise organizations like AT&T Wireless, the personalities in the various divisions and departments that are participating in that sales process are completely different. Their information needs are completely different. Their motivation for wanting to make a go or a no-go decision is completely different. And I was able to navigate that, I think, due to the exposure that I had to Myers-Briggs. And so when you're talking to purchasing people, they're very fact-based, they're very risk averse. They want to know, how are you going to minimize exposure and how are you going to deliver the best value? When you're talking to the business units, they want to know, how are you going to make a difference and make an impact in our business? How are you going to serve us in a way that helps us be competitive? And when you're talking to the finance people, it's all about the quantitative elements. It's just the data. And you've got to build credibility by having those kinds of answers. If you're not aware of those types of dynamics and you're a strong salesperson, you're very likely missing out and losing out on opportunities because you sort of failed to serve the information needs of your audience. After I left that company, which is called Adecco, I went into a variety of different organizations. One of them was a marketing firm out of New York. And I took over a team there that was also selling into the technology division. And what I learned from that experience was that sometimes people have resistance to big ideas and big opportunities. And you can talk to them about it, but sometimes it's better to just show them. And so the average sale price of the average ticket price, if you will, of that particular organization was around 600K when I took the team over. And I was telling my sales folks, listen, I really don't even want you getting out of bed in the morning unless you've got $1 million or better deal. And I got a lot of pushback on that. And they were like, oh, Jeff, you're coming from this big organization. It's a Fortune 50 company. And, you do big deals there, but we don't have that kind of opportunity. And I said, no, I don't believe that. I just don't believe it. So let's get to work. Rolled up my sleeves, started doing a lot of time in the air. In fact, I built a million miles on American Airlines alone, just going out into the field and working with customers and working with my reps. And when I left that organization, the average sale price was $2.4 million, up from 600. We had quadrupled revenue year over year, and we did that consistently while I was there. And the big takeaway from that is the role of leadership. How can leaders effectively connect with the people that they're leading? And again, thinking about that psychometric model, how do I lead from a perspective that's most effective for that specific employee? What do I need to do to direct and delegate in a way that unlocks their potential, that sets down their resistance, that addresses their needs to be able to engage? And it was a really profound experience for me because I didn't know that I was capable of that until I got put into that role and had to go deliver it. Those two experiences have been sort of foundational and fundamental for me understanding how the world works, how people work, and how best to get the best out of people. I'm going to fast forward. I went through a couple of startups that I've had successful exits with. I've had some corporate roles that I've had some success with. And I then founded iBridged, which is where I am today. We leverage those experiences and those tools, the psychometrics in particular, and some behavioral modeling to help organizations learn how to do exactly what I've done in those previous stories that we just talked about. And I've been talking at you for a minute, so I'm going to pause and see if you've got any questions.
Yeah, Jeff, I think the biggest one is, of course, a lot of people do take tests like Myers-Briggs. What do you think really drew you to it to really embody it? I think sometimes we take tests like that and it feels like a cliche icebreaker to get to know the new team or whatever. What makes you think you dove right into that? What makes you think you did that or why you did that?
Yeah, I think, ironically, based on my personality type, I'm naturally curious. I'm naturally interested in how the world works, but more importantly, I'm on the feeling side of the thinking and feeling dichotomy of Myers-Briggs. I'm very interested in the relationship and relational side of the world. And so I was drawn to it. It's like, oh my gosh, this is like a code book for people. And again, it was just something that had never occurred to me previously. I just didn't know what it could do and how effective it could be. And so the moment that I saw it, it was like a lightning rod going through me, like, wow, I understand people in a whole new level. And I've just continued to build on that ever since then.
I love that you mentioned that, Jeff. I think it's so important once you get something like that that you can feel inside you that you're excited about. I think it makes it easier to share with a team, as you mentioned, as with roles and leadership, is really bringing that, embodying that. I think it gets more people interested or at least willing to hear what you have to say. As you mentioned, having a team that didn't think they could sell, and then you quadruple the sales when you leave.
Yeah.
It's just something that's impressive.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so much fun. Well, I think one of the gold stars that goes with the whole story is, these relationships are 20 or 30 years old, and I still have them. Right, those are people that are still friends of mine, even after all of this time, because we did something that they did something that they didn't think they were capable of doing.
So, with in that journey, man, you went on, a true journey. Can you give me a time where you could have gone east, you could have gone west, you made a decision not really knowing the outcome?
that's that's a bit of the story of my life, actually. Wow, that is such a fun question. I am not naturally risk averse as some personality types are. I am very open to new things, new beginnings, new ideas, new ways of trying things. And so I'm never overly hesitant to make a left turn or a right turn. And what I've learned over time, I think, is sort of redefining the definition of failure, which has been super powerful from my perspective, from the sense of I'm not afraid to take chances, knowing that it could fail and doing it anyway. Because for me, the prize, the reward is one, the experience, and two, what you learn from it, because I think that's invaluable and it's one of those things that can never be taken away. So I've made a lot of choices, a lot of decisions where it could have gone left or it could have gone right, and have been completely okay and comfortable with it, knowing that whatever the outcome was, something good was going to come from it.
Jeff, I love that you mentioned that. I always tell people it feels like when you're going the first time, maybe you make a big decision, not really knowing the outcome, you just go for it. It's almost like that roller coaster feeling when you're up at the top and you drop down and you can kind of feel it in your stomach. But I think the more and more
Yeah.
you do something like that, the better the experience is. You're almost excited for that change to come about or that new opportunity.
That's a fact. In fact, there's a bit of a thrill that happens, that occurs, and that a thrilling feeling that comes from trying something new and going, in a direction that's undiscovered or previously unexplored. And again, that aligns with my personality type. There are others who don't enjoy that, who have a visceral reaction to that's risky because there's a lot of unknowns, which for me is part of the juice, right? There's a lot of unknowns. We're going to go figure it out. For other personality types, it's like there's a lot of unknowns. We probably shouldn't take that step. We probably shouldn't move in that direction. And often what I find is that those folks who are more cautious are typically better on the execution side than I am. So while I'm out exploring all of these new things and great ways of doing things, those are usually the folks that are actually turning them into realities.
Jeff, that's a really interesting outlook because I was going to ask, knowing all these different personality types is part of your leadership strategy to kind of put people in the best position for them to succeed. Maybe it won't look the same for everyone, but
The answer is yes, with an asterisk, and the asterisk is, when if you ever talk to anybody from Myers-Briggs or from Wiley, who produces the Everything Disc psychometric, they would tell you that those tools would not be good tools to use for putting people in seats. I call that task to type, or type to task. You can say it either way. The idea is that, oh, well, because I'm a certain personality type, I should be in a certain kind of role. And so there's a lot of resistance from them, and maybe not even resistance, maybe an outright objection to using the tools in that manner. And so the asterisk for me when I say yes to the question is it's not about mapping people in terms of type to task. It is, though, about helping people understand what are your natural strengths? What are those? Because what we want to do is we want to amplify them. But actually, I want to do a quick insertion here. There's a quote that's often attributed to Bruce Lee that says, your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness. So I just want to insert that and then I'll reference it here in a second. So we use these assessments to help people see what they're naturally good at. But it's really important to understand that just because you're good at something doesn't mean you're naturally bad at something else. More importantly, you may have a blind spot that can then be developed that allows you to be good at that sort of thing. I'll tell you a quick story about that in a second, but here's the mapping to the Bruce Lee quote. Your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness. My greatest strength is I love to think about big picture. I love to think about long-term, more strategic thinking. I am significantly not great at the execution stuff because I'm not detail oriented. But does that mean that I can't do it? No, it doesn't. I can be detail oriented. What does that look like for me? Well, it means that I really got to get in a quiet space where there aren't any distractions, and I got to switch my brain into detail mode. And that takes a bit of a discipline and a skill, maybe to some extent, to be able to make that mental shift and get into the headspace and the role that is needed for me at the time. And that's the reason why we don't really do type to task, because you may be good at things, but it doesn't mean that you're bad or that you're unable to do things. So the story I wanted to tell you was this. One of my roles at Apple was in product management. In fact, the product that I managed was Apple Care, which if anybody's purchased an Apple product is familiar with. And when I took that product over, it was in a very, very steep revenue decline for a variety of really big, important reasons. And so I loved getting in and understanding the problem and then coming up with a solution. And the solution that we had was fantastic and was super effective and reversed revenue erosion and improved margin at the same time. So that was the fun part of the role that really aligned with my personality type. But it also required me to then write, we called them PIPs, or a product or a program implementation plan. Well, an implementation plan is like very linear and it's step by step. And it's like, you do this, then do that. Here's the resource requirements. Here's the contingency planning if what you think is going to happen doesn't work. Here's the budget requirements. Here's all the people that need. I mean, it was detail after detail. And then we involved outside vendors. And so there's internal work being done. There's external work being done. Was I unable to do that work? It's not my strong suit. And the answer was no. The implementation plan, first of all, it worked. Let's start with that. It worked, but writing it was grueling, and I must have spent probably 3 weeks working on it to get that first draft where it was, a document that could be circulated and collaborated on. I would go home at the end of the day and I was exhausted from doing that work. Why? Because that wasn't my natural strength. I was capable of doing the work, but it required me to grab from energy sources that I didn't normally use to get that work done. That was the requirement. I did get it done. It did work, and we got that program launched, and it was phenomenal.
Jeff, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't really think about it that way. Instead of the type to task, just utilizing that tool as almost like a guiding force, but not the end all be all of what you're doing or what you're capable of.
Yeah, yeah. Another example of this, Jeremy, and you and I talked about this previously on Myers-Briggs in particular. There's the sensing and the intuition dichotomy, the S and the N. It's the second dichotomy in the four dichotomies. And people with a sensing preference, meaning they naturally, have that alignment with that particular type, are generally linear thinkers. They are very detail oriented and they're very tactical. And they also have a relationship with time. They have this perpetual sense of urgency. They want to work on what they're working on and then move to the next thing. They're also very reaction oriented, if you will. Something happens and they are the best people to be ready on a hair trigger to go address that need. On the other side of that dichotomy, which is the space that I occupy, is the intuition or the N type and preference. Again, I mentioned this earlier, big picture thinkers. In other words, we sort of see the entire field versus just that one player that we're up against. We think about things that are future state. We think about things that are conceptual or theoretical. We're looking at information sources that may to others seem disparate, except we see the patterns in those informations or those information sources. And so what's the big deal there? Well, I'm not usually very reactionary. When there's a problem, I don't panic because I'm sitting back trying to figure it out, where others do. So when there's a crisis, S types are absolutely better equipped to go deal with the crisis. But when you're thinking about, well, how do we prevent the crisis in the first place? And how do we minimize the damage of a potential crisis? That's a space that I can move into very easily and comfortably. So I just wanted to give that as a bit of a secondary example of how this assessment sort of helps me see and then understand the world, and then also see and understand my skills and my preferences.
Jeff, that is great. It's just one of those things. And we had talked about this earlier. I think so much of it is the more you know yourself and how you operate under stress or the most perfect day. I think it tells a lot about how you're going to react or interact with not just a crisis at hand, but kind of the world as it is.
Yeah, that's a fantastic observation. And again, the work at iBridge is really about helping reveal and uncover those traits for people. Some people are very self-aware. I'm just going to give this to you from, sort of like all the real world experience. Some people are very self-aware and others are completely not. And so these assessments sort of level that playing field on teams. It's like, oh, we all kind of now know each other. As a result of that, we all kind of know each other's strengths, natural strengths. And then we also, to the Bruce Lee quote, we also sort of understand some of the correlating blind spots now.
So
When I think about leadership, in that concept or that context, I'm I'm not a super detailed guy naturally. That's my thing. I know that about myself. But if I'm leading someone who has a preference for that sensing type, I know that to be effective with that individual, I gotta make an adjustment. If I'm going to give an instruction like, "Hey, I'd like you to go deliver this thing," that's not enough. I've got to say, listen, I need you to deliver this thing, but here's the steps that I'd like you to go through. Here are the key things that I need you to be aware of. Here are 3 things that I need you to be careful about. And that S type is going to be receiving that information and they're going to welcome it like, oh, this is exactly what I need to be successful. But I have to know first that I have to be the one to make that shift. And then secondarily, well, first I have to know that that's what they need from me. And then I have to be able to deliver it.
Jeff, it's great that you mentioned that. It's funny because the way I lay out my podcast and the pre-production, I'm setting out the list of questions. Here's the steps on what you need to do to sign up for a time, XYZ, because I found with some people that just makes it so much easier and even less stressful for them jumping on the podcast.
Exactly.
They already kind of have that pre-plan. We do a quick 5-minute intro, so the butterflies, if anyone has butterflies, is out of the way, and it's just trying to think of new ways to make it easier for someone to say yes. Really, just as
Yeah.
we did with sales.
Yeah. 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 I love the parallel that you're making there. That's exactly right. When it comes down to leadership, it's all about influence, right? Can you influence people to do what you want them to do? Can you influence people to say yes? Can you influence people to be accepting and receptive of what you need to do or your vision or what you want to get done? Which is exactly the same thing that we do in sales. Exactly the same thing.
So, Jeff, title of the podcast, Into the Unknown. What are you working on right now?
I've got a couple of things in the hopper. We're always perpetually working on finding new clients. This year we added Grammarly to our client roster. We have some other really great names. We have clients at a company called Stryker, which is the third largest med device company in the world. We have clients at Apple and Google and Facebook and companies whose products that most people are already using. But we're always working on finding new clients that we can go add value to. In addition to that, we're going to be launching a podcast, hopefully by the end of the month. That's sort of the goal. That really looks at psychometrics and leadership and behavioral models and the combination of those things that really unlock team-based potential and leadership development. So I'm really looking forward to those conversations. We've got some really, really excellent folks lined up to come in and have those conversations. One of the key themes, two of the key themes actually, are going to be to hear about their leadership development journey and what are the tools, strategies, or techniques that inform their leadership style. And then also any advice that they would have for new folks coming up in that space. What advice would they give to them if they were giving themselves advice at 10 years ago or 20 years ago? What would that be? So really excited about that. And then the third one, which is a little longer arc, I'm writing a book now about all of those same things, all of those same topics. Super excited about that, but it's a longer journey. I think we're thinking maybe 6 months it'll be done. But we got the intro done, and chapter 1 is done and off to the publisher for editing, and we're grinding through that. So those are the three things that are really our top priorities right now.
Jeff, that's all really exciting. If people want to learn more about it, where can they go? Are you on social media? Are you online?
Yeah, you can always stop by the website, which is ibridged.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Jeff Harnois on LinkedIn. I don't do a lot with other social platforms. We do have a YouTube channel. As we start publishing our podcasts, they'll end up there. So that would be a good place. We'll also do that on Apple Podcast and Spotify. But probably through the website, and there's a place there to book an appointment if you really want to have a conversation.
Jeff, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I really appreciate it.
Jeremy, thanks so much for the invitation and the participation. I enjoyed the conversation. I hope you did too.
We'll talk soon.
Thanks. Take care.
That was another fun episode of Into the Unknown. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. And if it provides you any value or entertainment, I would love if you shared it with others, liked, subscribed, and really just help the podcast grow. Again, tell a friend, tell a foe, just anyone who might enjoy hearing some stories of people's own journeys and what got them to where they are today. Till next time.